Welcome back to Easily Explained, where today we will be talking about irregular preterite tense verbs. So let's get started. With irregular preterite tense verbs, there's no separate conjugation charts for different verbs like AR, ER, IR verbs. They're not grouped into categories like that, like how we did preterite tense and present tense. We had different conjugation charts for AR verbs, for ER verbs, and for IR verbs. We had the hasta o, vamos hasta el salón, like that. We had separate, and it was distinguished. You could look at a verb and see, oh, it's an AR verb, so this is the conjugation chart I'm going to use. In irregular preterite tense verbs, though, we kind of combine both of the preterite tense charts, and the specific irregular preterite tense verbs that we use with that chart, we use whether they're ER, IR, or AR verbs. But there are also irregular preterite tense verbs that don't even follow that same formula I'm talking about, that same combined conjugation chart. So that's why it's important to know which ones follow that formula and which ones follow other patterns, because they're very irregular at some certain points. And then it comes down to memorization. This is going to be like this, and then these are the exceptions for this. It gets confusing, so we're going to start with just the formula of the ones that there's a lot of verbs that follow that pattern. Then we'll start talking about some of the even more irregular ones and maybe patterns you can find with that to make it a little bit easier to remember. So the first step for this formula or conjugation chart is to write out both the AR preterite tense chart and the ER-IR preterite tense chart. If you remember, those are actually the exact same for both ER and IR verbs, so that's why we consider it's just combining two charts. Alright, now let's fill out this little equation that I made to make it make a little bit more sense. Basically, on one side we have the AR verbs chart plus the ER-IR verbs chart, and we'll look at which ones to use from which chart is equal to our irregular preterite tense chart for at least the verbs we're going to discuss today, because there are obviously exceptions. Let's start by filling out our AR conjugation chart. We have este, o, amos, estáis, aron. Now for ER conjugation chart. For ER and I verbs, we have iste, yo, imos, estéis, eran. Now I'm going to highlight the parts we're going to take from both charts. To get the conjugation chart for the irregular preterite tense verbs, basically we use the entire ER-IR conjugation chart except in the yo form and in the el, ella, usted form. So the parts I've highlighted, let's read out how the conjugation chart would look like. We have iste, o, imos, estéis, eran. Alright, let's write that out. We have iste, o, imos, estéis, eran. And also notice that in our irregular chart, we have no accents. There's no accent on the O like there is right here. There's no accent on the E like there is right here. And that is no mistake. One constant thing, one thing that stays the same when we're conjugating for irregular verbs we never use any accent. We take the base, like I have a from AR, iste from ER, IR, o from AR, and so on. We never translate any of the accents onto the irregular charts. There's no specific reason, but we just don't. And that means that irregular verbs have to change their stem in order for us to distinguish between an irregular preterite tense verb and, let's say, a present tense verb. For example, if we have the verb tener, which is an irregular preterite tense verb that follows this formula. Tener is actually an irregular in the present tense as well, because if we talk about tener in the yo form is tengo. But if we were to still keep this stem of teng, T-E-N-G, in the irregular, then it would still be el tengo, which wouldn't make sense. So that's why the stem itself also has to change. So we're not going to say the stem is not going to be ten, it's actually going to be tuv. But we'll get more into the specific stems later. That's one thing that you will have to memorize, even though we have this formula right here. And so that's why, since it's so specific to every single verb, we are going to cover the stems in a separate video. Right now we're just going to be practicing the endings, since you have to get used to combining the two charts and knowing which ending to use from which chart. So in your practice, you're just writing the correct ending or answering the question, which has to do with the correct ending, because we want to make sure that you don't confuse yourself by combining those two charts. You have to really know which ones to use for which chart, because many of the irregular preterite tense verbs, not all of them, but many of them, stick to the same pattern. So this is very important. And if they don't stick to the same pattern, there are only slight variations, or only a couple follow a completely different pattern. So pause the video now and complete the practice problems below. Alright, let's go over it together. Number 1, we're just writing out the full conjugation chart for irregular preterite tense verbs. It's both for practice and because it will make it a lot easier to answer the 4 questions below it, since we can just look at the conjugation chart itself, because that is our explanation, or showing your work, as you would call it in math. Alright, so we have iste, o, imos, isteis, ieron. We basically use all of the ER, IR endings except for in the yo form and in the el, ella, usted form, and remember, no accents. Alright, number 2, irregular preterite form for tú is right here. Iste, since it's not the yo form or the el form, el, ella, usted form, we're going to be using the ER, IR ending, which is iste. For nosotros, we also use the ER, IR ending, which is imos. And for the L form, we use the AR ending, o, but remember, no accent. Alright, number 5, which form do you take, AR or ER, IR, for the ellos form of an irregular preterite tense verb? And what is that ending? Well, we have the ellos form right here. We take the ER, IR form, and that is quiero. Congratulations, you are now an expert at irregular preterite tense verb endings. If this video helped, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends, and we'll see you guys next time to talk more about irregular preterite verbs. Bye!